You know that story, the one about the struggling artist who finally makes it big? We love that story. It's all about talent, passion, and just pure hard grit. But what if that story is leaving out the most important part of the picture? What if success is less about how hard you work and more about the invisible system you're working in? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that very idea. I mean, you can picture it, right? The musician, fueled by nothing but coffee and ambition, just trying to nail that perfect track. Or the indie game devs, huddled around a glowing screen, literally building a new world from scratch. It's the classic montage of the creative economy. It's romantic, it's inspiring, but the research we're digging into today says these aren't just stories about grit. They're actually clues to a much bigger, more complicated system at play. And that leads us right to the big question. All that passion, all that talent, all that grit, is it really enough? According to some major new research, the answer is a pretty clear no. And figuring out why is absolutely crucial for anyone in these fields, whether you're a creator trying to break in, an investor looking for the next big thing, or a policymaker who's shaping the whole landscape. Okay, so here's the twist. And it's not just that the industry is tough, we all know that. The real twist is why it's tough. It's not random. The research we're exploring today uncovers this kind of hidden architecture that quietly decides who gets seen, who gets paid, and who ultimately gets to have a real sustainable career. Here's the core argument, and honestly, it's a bombshell. Inequality isn't just some unfortunate accident in the creative world. It's a feature, not a bug. It is literally baked into the very structure of what researchers are calling production networks. And that means we got to shift our focus away from just the individual artist and start looking at the entire system they're stuck inside. So what in the world is a production network? Well, simply put, it's everything. It's the whole journey, from that first little spark of an idea all the way to the final product reaching an audience, and even how it gets saved for the future. You can think of it like the complete supply chain for culture. And just like any other supply chain, there are specific spots where all the power gets concentrated. To really get our heads around how this all works, we need a framework. And the researchers broke down this super complex journey into 5 clear stages. This is so fascinating because it lets us see exactly where the roadblocks and the gatekeepers pop up. So these 5 steps cover the entire life cycle. First, you've got creation. That's the idea. Then comes production. That's actually making the thing, recording the album, coding the game. Then there's distribution, getting it out there onto platforms and into stores. After that is exchange. That's how the money flows, from ticket sales to streaming royalties. And finally, archiving is how the work is preserved. The thing is, inequality can and absolutely does show up at every single one of these stages. And I really need to stress, this isn't just some theory someone cooked up. This whole framework comes from something called the Cicerone Project, a massive, multi-year research project funded by the EU. We're talking leading universities coming together to map out these creative networks all across Europe, doing deep dives into music, games, fashion, you name it. This is serious, evidence-based work meant to actually inform policy. All right, so that's the theory. But what does it actually look like when the rubber hits the road? Let's jump into the evidence and see these gatekeepers in action. Let's just start with one number. It's pretty staggering. Fewer than 3% of the producers on the US music charts are women. 3%. Now, a number that low can't be explained away by just a lack of talent or ambition. No way. It is a blaring siren signaling a huge structural barrier, a network that is systematically keeping women out of one of its most powerful jobs. And these real-world stories show you exactly how this plays out. In Sweden, researchers found an artist who literally had to start her own label just to get her music made. But guess what? She still had to rely on the major distributors to get it heard. In Poland, a brilliant jazz trio found out their shot at playing major festivals was controlled by one single, powerful indie label. And get this, in Vienna, a game startup run by women was dismissed as being too political just because their game featured female characters. That's a barrier at the very first step of creation. But wait a minute, I hear you thinking, what about the internet? Didn't Spotify and YouTube and all that, didn't they democratize everything? Well, this is what the research calls the digital paradox. The promise was amazing, right? Anyone can upload a song, anyone can release a game. But the reality? These platforms just became the new gatekeepers. And they're even more powerful and centralized. They control the distribution and they capture almost all of the value, leaving most creators fighting over the crumbs. So what looks like an open door is really just a new kind of velvet rope. So, After seeing the framework and the pretty stark evidence, what do we actually do with all this? Why does it matter to you? Well, because whether you're making policy, investing money, or creating art, you are part of one of these networks, and your decisions have real ripple effects. If you're a policymaker, the takeaway here is huge. Just throwing money at grants for new projects, only supporting that first creation step, it's not enough. You have to look at the entire network. The real points of leverage are later on, in distribution and exchange. Policy needs to help artists get their work seen and make sure they get a fair slice of the pie they helped create. It's about intervening where power and money are piling up unfairly. And hey, if you're an investor, a manager, or maybe you organize festivals, this is a call to look in the mirror. You've got to ask, are my decisions just reinforcing the same old gatekeepers? Am I giving new, independent voices a real shot, or am I just giving them the illusion of one? A richer, more exciting culture comes from actively diversifying where you put your resources and your trust. It's that simple. And if you're a creator, listen up. The message here isn't to give up hope. Not at all. It's to get strategic. This research proves that building your network, creating alliances, and finding trusted collaborators is just as important as perfecting your art. Your connections can open doors that pure talent, by itself, just can't. You have to understand the game you're playing to have a chance at winning it. Okay, let's bring this all home. We started with that simple, heroic story of individual grit. But now, looking through this lens of production networks, we have a much smarter, more powerful way to understand what it really takes to succeed. Let's go back to that musician pulling the all-nighter and those game devs coding their hearts out. We can see their stories in a whole new light now. Yeah, of course, they're stories about passion and hard work. But more than that, they're stories about navigating a really complex, often unfair system of concentrated power. A system full of gatekeepers who control access, visibility, and who gets the rewards. If you take just one thing away from this explainer, let it be this quote, which comes straight from the research. Inequalities in creative industries are less about talent or effort and more about where you sit in the network. Your position inside that structure can define your potential way more than your portfolio ever could. And that leaves us all with one final, really important question to ask ourselves. Because we are all part of different networks, at work, in our communities, in our industries. So the question is, what role are you playing? In your network, are you, consciously or not, acting as a gatekeeper and keeping the old structures in place? Or are you using your position, no matter how big or small it is, to become a gate opener for someone else?